Welcome into the Thunder Basketball Universe presented by COOP Ale Works. We're back in our podcast studio because we're back from a very long road trip, 7 days on the West Coast. The Thunder playing 4 games against Western Conference opponents and has finally returned back to Oklahoma City for a couple of games. And so we thought this was a good opportunity to just debrief, go over this road trip, and to help us out, we brought in our good friend, Royce Young, who was on this trip with us.
That's true.
Road buddy.
Road buddies.
Road buds.
Road weary. I don't know.
Yeah, seriously.
The immense respect I have for you guys to do that all the time. It's like, whew. I used to do it some, but whew, that's a lot of time on the road.
And the funny part was we really only had 4 flights.
Right.
Yeah, I know.
It was a simple trip, but it was a long trip.
Yeah.
And the LA trip in particular was just really unique because you play 3 games. You're staying in Los Angeles the entire time. 3 games, 2 different teams, and they're all in the same arena. It's it's really confusing on the brain.
It had like kind of a playoff series feel. At least starting with the Clippers, you play them like game 1, game 2, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, who's this new team here playing game 3?
A brand new team.
Especially on the second night of a back-to-back when you really dug into that matchup with the Clippers and there were clear adjustments made by both teams and counters, and then it's like the next night.
New team.
Oh, it's a totally different
and they make
team.
Staples Center, Crypto.
Yeah.
They make it feel so different for the Lakers too.
The lighting is even different the Lakers game.
I like the Lakers lighting.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It's like
music's all different, everything. Yeah. And the 2 teams are so juxtaposed just in general, their whole brands and ethoses too, but also the way that they play. I mean, the Clippers games were such knockdown, drag out, slow paced style games, and then the Lakers game was like a track meet.
Yeah. Interesting.
All right, well, let's get into these games because they were all had a different life of their own, as we're mentioning. And the first one, the Thunder played the Clippers, and this was a mini-series. The Thunder's only played the Clippers in mini-series this season. Yeah. The first one was actually the second week of the season back in October, and then this one this past week. And the first game was a low-scoring game, 100-101, and it ended up being it resulted in a very clutch play by our very own Lu Dort at the end on Kawhi Leonard. But the game up to that point was just a rock fight. Yeah,
just absolute defensive struggle throughout the entire night. And so it was great that it was defined by that final defensive stand by Lu Dort. Guarded Kawhi Leonard for practically the entire 24 seconds of the shot clock to end the game. And didn't even allow Leonard to get a shot up. So excellent job executing defensively in a one-on-one situation by Dort, but also the guys around him as well, just kind of shutting off any potential driving angles and forcing Kawhi to have to rethink what he was going to do over and over again.
Yeah, and that game, again, kind of, we talked about it feeling kind of like a playoff series. That game had kind of a playoff-y vibe to it, just the way, like you mentioned it, Paris, the way it slowed down. That's how playoff games often feel, is each possession has this kind of weight to it.
Right.
In the modern NBA, we don't see a lot of games 101, 100 as often as we used to. And this game just kind of had that tension to it, and it's great experience for the Thunder to go in there and battle with the Clippers. Obviously, there was the injury to Paul George, but before that injury happened late in the second half, that was a full strength Clippers team, and a team that's been playing pretty well lately, in the top half of the Western Conference. And one thing about the Lu Dort stop on the Kawhi Leonard shot at the very end of the game, one thing that was really important to that was the Clippers didn't have a timeout because they challenged a call with 31 seconds left, didn't win that challenge. And, I think that's one of those very kind of subtle but very important things because they were kind of disorganized, couldn't get into a set that they wanted to. You could even see the play that the Clippers were trying to kind of get into. Marcus Morris was like, do you want a screen? Do you not want a screen? Couldn't really communicate with Kawhi Leonard what he wanted to do. But the other thing I would say is that, they kind of tried to either dummy screen or screen Lu Dort 4 different times.
Yep.
And there's so often that you see players just kind of accept those screens and accept those switches late in games. And Josh Giddey could have done that. And Dort kind of could have just accepted the screen, let Giddey take over and guard Kawhi Leonard on that crucial spot. But Dort is one of the absolute elite players at just saying, no, I'm not going to switch. I'm going to stay in front of my man and I'm going to be the one guarding this player for this final possession. And I think that's one of the, there's many things that make Lu Dort an elite defensive player, but I just think his mindset to say, this is my matchup and I'm not going to let a screen take me out of this. I'm getting back in front of it. There's many plays this year where he did that sort of thing. And obviously his defense on Kawhi Leonard was just stellar after that.
And there have been some examples of times where the Thunder strategically has allowed that switch to occur. But you're absolutely correct, Royce, and it's the reason why he's the leader in offensive fouls drawn with all of those times that he busts around the screen and draws an illegal screen. And what that does is it really helps uphold the entire integrity of the Thunder's defensive scheme. If you're able to fight over the top of the screen or duck underneath it and get back in front of the ball, the other 4 guys in the defense just have less to do. And what you want is your defense to be doing less movement. The more
scrambling, recovering, trying to communicate who's got who.
Yeah, it really simplifies things, and it's what's allowed the Thunder to be in passing lanes all year, be one of the best turnover forcing teams in the league all year, because the guys have just been solidly in position.
When I was watching the play live, the dummy screens that you were mentioning, Royce, they looked almost like indecisive screens to me. And in my head, the story that I had built up was, these guys don't want to pick up an offensive foul.
That's a great point. As you were just now saying that, I was thinking.
I was like, that's Lu Dort. Never mind. Like, good luck, Kawhi.
I might for all your analysis and psychoanalysis.
I honestly think that you're probably onto something.
It might cause an ounce of hesitation because if you think about it, Lu, he doesn't get screened. Like if he fights through the screen, he's still on his man, or he mitigates the screen by drawing an offensive foul. So in a lot of ways,
you have to think Marcus Morris had at least some level of that in his head, that like, I can't go screen Lu Dort really hard here because I might just blow this whole thing up on my own with a bad screen.
Well, there were 9 offensive fouls called in that game.
That's true.
Overall.
Holy cow.
Anyway, the vast majority of those were against the Clippers, so I would not be surprised, Paris, if your theory is correct.
Well, no one will know, but that's my theory. All right, that was the defensive end of the floor, and that's what won the Thunder the game in that first Clippers meeting. Well, a couple of days later, Thunder faced the Clippers again, and one of the through lines, we've already kind of hinted at it, but the defensive end, and particularly the defense by the Clippers, very aggressive. They were blitzing Shea nearly every single time that he touched the ball. But the interesting thing was Shea was breaking this double team and using the double team to his team's advantage. So, Nick, you pointed it out, and I thought this was really good observation by you, but he was dragging those double teams away from the rest of his teammates.
This is something we've seen him do throughout the course of the season, where he recognizes that when he's getting doubled, that he just tries to create more space on the floor on the outside of that double team. So having a screener come up and try to set a screen higher on the floor for him, closer to midcourt, that make sure that there's more room on the backside to actually execute off of that. If that screen is coming below the 3-point line or around the elbow, that just allows the other 3 Clippers defenders to really be clogged in the passing lanes. And we did see that throughout the course of this mini-series. The Thunder did get kind of caught and bogged a few more times than normal. That's because the Clippers are a really, really good defense. And that really, kind of reared its head some in that second meeting in particular, as the Clippers scored 22 points off the Thunder's turnovers. But still, it's remarkable to see a guy in his 5th year like Shea be so proficient at that, be able to bait defense in the way that he wanted to. And the fact of the matter is he still scored 30 points on 15 shots.
30 points in each of those games.
In 27 minutes, too.
Yeah, exactly.
Hyper efficient in the minutes that he played. And, one of the things about that second game, too, and kind of going back just to the playoff vibe of it, there's certainly, that game carried a lot of weight and a lot of importance for the Clippers as well, that you're going to see adjustments like that. And again, I go back to the kind of the level of experience that you gain in those sort of games. Whatever happens the rest of this season or in the future, the Thunder will be in some playoff games where teams are making those adjustments, and they're, everything's like hyper focused on matchups and what are you going to do? What did we see the night before? How are we going to counter that? And that's a great experience for the Thunder to kind of learn through some of those things, whether it's the double teams that SGA has to deal with, whether it's some of the other players and finding some of their spots, maybe smarter shots to take, or just, the Clippers obviously made a little bit of an adjustment without Paul George in that one. And Kawhi Leonard was hyper aggressive in the mid-range, played just a fantastic game. I think he was 13 of 15 shooting in that one. He was just an absolute monster. Russell Westbrook was great. Probably one of the best games I think he's played for the Clippers so far. So it's one of those kind of experience games where this is how it can feel a lot of times in a playoff series. And if there were going to be a game 3 and you were turning this over one more time, you've got to let go of the game 2 just the same way. Like the series is 1-1, you move on. So I think that those types of things kind of stack and add up for the Thunder, where you get into those experiences, tense environment, and you can really take something out of it.
Yeah, and you can't buy this late March intense experience. You would hate to have to wait until next year to get that type of experience, and very possibly could have been that way if things had shuffled differently throughout the course of the season. But with this young group being where it is in its development arc, to be getting this type of experience this early in the process is like remarkable. And these are experiences that they now don't have to go through for the first time next year.
That's a great point.
Yes, an excellent point. And the Thunder going up, the Clippers are the second oldest team in the NBA. Obviously, a lot of length, a lot of size, a lot of veteran experience on that team. Well, they had to get ready for the oldest team in the NBA the following night, the Lakers. And this is the Lakers team who was playing without LeBron James, but Anthony Davis obviously holding things down for that squad. And this was a really, really good test for OKC. And this turned out to be just a close game in itself. It was a physical game. It was a crunch time game, and the Thunder really battled and fought in this one. And we saw a lot of different guys step up. One guy in particular, Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, had himself a pretty good night in this one.
Well, it's a great example of these guys staying ready. We've talked about it all season long, and the way that they have to keep the faith that opportunity is going to come back around. And that's something that Mark Daigneault always talks about, is that these guys, they have to stay ready. And I asked him, well, how hard is it for them to keep the faith, and what do you all do as a coaching staff to make sure that they do? And Mark said, well, we have to make sure that it does come back around. We have to make sure that we are actively seeking out opportunities to get these guys into the games, to reward them for keeping the faith. And if you're saying, hang in there, stay ready, and you're never actually providing the opportunity, that can turn into some very dark days. And so the Thunder has been very intentional about making sure that things do come back around, and J-Rob was ready.
Yeah, and and one of the things about J-Rob too is that he was such an important role player on this team for first couple of months of the season. Then he had that really bad ankle sprain. And not only did that knock him out for an extended period of time, it was a hard one to get over. I talked to J-Rob about it, and it's really the first ankle sprain he's ever had in his life. And that sometimes can be a harder one to overcome because it's just the way it goes. But clearly he struggled getting some of his rhythm back after that injury. And he played some games with the Blue and did some good things there, but it's just a different animal when you come back into the NBA, and the speed of the game and the importance of the shots. And, for a guy like him that plays that sort of role where it may only be 2 shots in 15 minutes and you're expected to make them. And that can be really hard, and how a lot of people may judge your minutes based on whether the ball went in the basket or not. And J-Rob is a guy that does so many different types of things, whether it's rebounding, he's really smart pick and roll defender, really good at switching on to smaller players. We saw that in that Lakers game specifically, of him switching over on a guy like Dennis Schroeder and just cutting him off on drives. And I think that Jeremiah has a unique skill in that. But it was great to see the ball go in the basket for him, because it kind of validates those minutes a little bit. And that's something that he did so well as a role player early on in the season. He's such a smart, intelligent, key piece to have when he can step in games, make those shots that matter. He had multiple spots early this season that I remember where big shots and big moments.
Yeah.
And he's not shy of that. The ball just wasn't going in for him when he came back from that ankle, and now it's starting to a little bit.
Yeah, and while the Thunder's base system on both ends of the floor is very similar to what it was at the beginning of the year when J-Rob was more in the rotation, NBA teams, college teams, Paris, you would know this better than the two of us, are living organisms that change throughout the course of the season. J-Dub is a different player now than he was at the beginning of the season. Isaiah Joe's role on this team is different than it was at the beginning of the season. There's a couple. Kenrich Williams is no longer in the lineup, in the rotation right now. So the team that Jeremiah Robinson-Earl came back to is much different than the one that he left when he went down with that ankle injury. And so some of the guys that he had built up some of that kind of cohesion, rapport with, Poku, Trey Mann, those guys were not necessarily in the rotation when he came back to it as well. So that's why these seasons are so fascinating, and why it can be so tough to miss time, because not only, I think we've used this metaphor, it's like try to hop on a treadmill when it's already running.
Yeah, exactly. And J-Rob just doing a fantastic job of keeping his mind ready, just like we've seen from so many of the Thunder's role players and bench players so far this season, guys like Trey Mann and Isaiah Joe when he first broke into the scene, just that whole mentality of staying ready. He had 14 points on 5 of 6 from the field, knocked down a couple of 3-pointers as well. Had an assignment of defending Anthony Davis all the while. I mean, it doesn't get much more difficult than that, and held his own there. One other element of this game that I wanted us to talk about was Josh's rebounding in particular. He had 17 rebounds in this game, and it's not just the volume of rebounds, but what it did for the Thunder's offense that really stood out to me. When Josh is able to, wrangle down a defensive rebound, but then initiate the break by himself, it puts this team at such an advantage offensively, and you can tell that it's kind of fun when you see Josh get that rebound. It's like, okay, Let's go.
And also, like, it enables Mark to play different lineups when you're not getting beat on the boards because you have a guy like Josh Giddey that is an unusually sized point guard that can be so effective on the glass. But it's a great point, Paris. And there was a lot of times in that game where, the Thunder do want to play fast, but Josh was able to grab a rebound and get out and go or kick ahead to somebody else. And just overall, for a guy like Josh Giddey, it seems like there's so many times that we've seen in these kind of big games, playing in LA against the Lakers. There's a lot of a focus, a lot of stars on the sideline, even ones that Josh Giddey goes and rips the ball out of their hands. Didn't even know that was Leslie Mann.
That's great.
I think it was Judd Apatow, Leslie Mann, and Jason Bateman.
That's right.
Together.
Yeah. That's right.
Josh Giddey didn't care.
Yeah.
Locked in.
Give me the ball.
But I do think it
Leslie.
I think that they thought they were in trouble.
Isn't that the epitome of? Oh, sorry, just to stop it. Isn't this the epitome of like the Thunder as an organization encapsulated, right? Like there's glitzier, more glamorous teams, but this is like the scrappy, like give me the ball team, And,
another player might have walked up and been like,
I need the ball, Leslie. Excuse me.
Yeah, the Thunder's not
messing
apologizing
around
for anything. We're not messing around. We are like
I got to get this ball in bounds.
Solely focused on making an inbound pass.
Yeah,
and the game that's happening.
Well, when it's Josh Giddey throwing the inbound pass, you never know what might happen with it.
We probably saw something that he was like, I need to get the ball now so I can get it ahead.
Honestly, he might have. But, I just think that where I was going with that is like, whether it's Madison Square Garden, it just seems like Josh Giddey's got a little something when it comes to these kind of big games with a lot of attention. He hit big shots in that one and was a huge scorer in that game. Like you mentioned, the rebounding. I think it's kind of an unusual toughness for a 20-year-old in the NBA that he kind of has a tendency to show up in those big games like that.
It also just really lets your mind wander to the impact that this guy can have years down the line. I mean, he's still growing into his body and into the frame that he has, like when he's 26 years old in a playoff series. Like,
and he's had these experiences over and over again.
Yeah. And like, what kind of monster is he able to be in a playoff series that like, Royce, you know this, like these playoff series take on these like weird forms where guys' strengths are like really accentuated and their weaknesses are really accentuated, and like the games come down to whether or not guys can leverage their strengths against their weaknesses in the best way possible. And like Josh has so many like very clear, unique strengths that like you just never know which ones might be. I mean, what we've seen emerge this year is his ability to finish through contact around the rim. He's quadrupled his and one attempts this year from his rookie year. Like, you don't know. He's still such an unwritten person, an unwritten book in terms of like what those strengths are going to be down the line.
Yeah, and it, you let your mind wander, but like, what if Josh Giddey is in a playoff series and like the other team's got they're trying to downsize, and the Thunder say, well, we're going to play Josh Giddey at the 5.
Right.
It's like you've got these kind of like concepts that you can kind of start to think about because of the toughness that he shows in these types of games. And I think it's really fun to think about.
We talked to Josh after the game, and he said, I just got lost in the game. Just got lost in the competition. Exactly. I feel like even if he knew who Leslie Mann was, he probably would have had a very similar reaction to
Matt
that
Damon
moment.
or something, and he's like, I don't care. Beyonce, give me the ball.
Right. Oh, don't do that to Beyonce now. I might have to come over there.
All this playoff talk. All this playoff talk is to say, like, what the Thunder is focused on is developing the skills and the habits to be the type of team that down the line, when they are in playoff series, that they can lean back on these experiences that they're getting now. It just so happens, as we were talking about earlier, like they're in a situation that, there were no expectations laid out, but just for a team this young, it's remarkable that they're even even in these situations to have experience to lean back on in the future.
Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah, so a lot of really good signs that came out of that Lakers game, but just a few extra balls bounced in the Lakers' direction at the final, just the final moments of that game. The Lakers walk away with the win, and the Thunder, really scrappy effort, a lot of bright spots, but some lessons that they needed to carry over into their final game of this 4-game road trip, and it was several hours north, up in Portland, the Pacific Northwest, against a Portland team that was missing a lot of its heavy hitters, most of its heavy hitters. No Damian Lillard, no Yusuf Nurkic, no Anthony Simons, no Jeremy Grant. And so 4 out of their 5 main starters were gone. But for the Thunder, they've seen this time and time again where they're going up against a team that's missing maybe its most potent offensive player, and it just opens up a door for other guys to step into it, other guys who are motivated to take advantage of that opportunity. And so the Thunder really knew that they were going up against a motivated team, a hungry team, and a team that was going to throw a punch and compete. The other really fun storyline to this Portland game, which I found very fascinating, coming into this one, the Thunder played Portland 3 times this season, all of which came down to crunch time. Of the available 15 minutes of crunch time in those first 3 games, the Thunder played crunch time in 11 of them against the Trailblazers. In each of those games, going into the fourth quarter, the game was within 2 points. And in each of those games, the Thunder bounced back from as many as 10 points. So these were all crunch time games and all comeback games for the Thunder. And this game went right on that exact same script, which was fascinating to me.
Time is a flat circle.
It is. The wilder thing is that all 4 games between the Thunder and the Blazers last year were also 10 or more point comeback wins for the Thunder. So this is 8 straight wins for OKC over Portland, all double-digit comebacks. It's crazy. This series alone is why the Thunder is like the league leader in double-digit comebacks over the last 2 seasons.
Weird.
Truly.
It's uncanny.
It was wild. And this game was just such a slog. It was a fight. They're not hanging this one in the Louvre, right? It wasn't a pretty picture, but a win is a win, and the Thunder got it done the way that they needed to.
Yeah, when you play 82 of these things, sometimes that's the way they go. Especially in this case with this game, you can look at the players that are out, but like the Thunder have been that team too, where you're letting some other guys play, get some experiences. Those guys are hungry NBA players, whether they're young in their career or they're a little older and they're trying to make a statement for future employment. So those types of teams are extremely dangerous and can often be extremely difficult to play against. And I think for the Thunder, who haven't really been on the other side of that really hardly ever in these last couple of years, it's another great test of kind of your mental fortitude, your endurance, especially at the end of a road trip where you've just spent a week in Los Angeles hanging out, and then you go play an early tip in Portland against a team that's resting a bunch of or not playing a bunch of their main starters. It's a very difficult situation to get in. And so one of the things we were talking about before we started that the Thunder got down early in that game, was able to come back, but they didn't let the Blazers really go with that extra big counterpunch back. There was a little run there in the third quarter where I think the Blazers went up 6 again, but the game stayed close throughout. And so while the Thunder, like you said, Paris, they're not putting this one up and saying best game of the season right here. They were doing enough to stay in that game where you always felt a level of confidence that SGA, Josh, Lou, these guys that have been through these experiences are going to be able to find a way to get this one done because they weren't trying to scrap back from 10 or 12 down late.
Yeah, I want to make a distinction on something that Paris said that I think is going to be the ethos of this team moving forward too, because you said it was an ugly one, but they did what they needed to do to win the game. And a lot of times NBA teams will say that after a game where they've completely abandoned their identity. Right. They've handed the ball to their best player and said, go get a bucket over and over again. We're not going to pass the ball. We're not going to play this brand of basketball we want to. We're not going to defend the way that we want to. We're going to completely abandon our core defensive principles. And that is one version of doing what you have to do to win the game. That is not what the Thunder did here in Portland. What happened there was the Thunder really didn't have its fastball, didn't have its A game, but it didn't allow that to disrupt playing to its style, playing to its brand. And ultimately, at the end of the first half and at the end of the second half, they were actually able to kind of get over that hump mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it was, to get to that identity, to play the way that it wanted to play in those stretches, and that was enough to win the game. And I think moving forward, just for fans to recognize the difference between a team that's doing what it needs to win the game versus coming back to its identity and getting over that hump in order to win a dirty, ugly game.
And I think another way to think about this is throughout this season, we've said time and time again, when the Thunder shot's not falling, Coach Daigneault often says, we have to find just grittier ways to score. And the Thunder did that in this game because during stretches, the offense was just up and down, shots weren't falling, Portland had it going, and so they just had to find ways to just chip away, try to get some momentum rolling. Well, by the end of the game, the Thunder had 29 points off of Portland turnovers, 26 fast break points, and 21 second chance points. Over 20 in all 3 of those categories shows you just there's a high level of activity outside of just like dribbling, passing, and shooting. And that's another way to generate a lot of offense throughout a night that can carry you in a close game like this.
And it was 2 defensive plays that slammed the door in that one.
Right.
With Lu coming up with a deflection that led to a run out, and then obviously the final kind of hammer at the end, which was another Dort steal. And that's what it takes in those types of games. And that, to your point, Nick, I think especially when you have a player like SGA that is capable of what he's capable of, you can feel that pull to just saying like, can you just carry us to a win, please, right here? But that's not what the Thunder want to do. That's not who they want to be. They want to build an identity, one that's elastic, that can change kind of throughout a game because you might need it to, but not one that is win at all costs because that's all that's matter. This is still a building process to where, I think that we're all getting a pretty good sense of what the Thunder identity kind of looks like, but it's still kind of a evolving, growing thing. And you don't want to what's the saying? I'm going to get it wrong. Cut off your nose to spite your face.
I was going to say, you don't want to take a shortcut that's a setback in disguise. And that's a line from Sam Presti at the beginning of the season, envisioning what could be to come and what we see around the NBA in a lot of different markets, which is we've got to win tonight. So what is the path of least resistance to doing that, as opposed to thinking about the bigger picture?
Yeah, absolutely. And it came down to it where, it's Josh Giddey hitting the big 3 that was probably the biggest play of the game. Trusting teammates in those big spots. Again, Josh Giddey, he just seems he has a knack for those tough-minded plays. I think he keeps showing up in those moments. But you come back from this road trip. I think a lot of people, if you would have said the Thunder are going to go 2-2 on this thing, you said, I'll take that all day. That's pretty good. Considering the level of competition, the distractions that you might be facing, the road environments, all those types of things. Of course you wanted to get greedier. That Lakers game was right there. It was back and forth. It was a total toss up, but 2-2 was a really good road trip for this team.
Solid road trip, and a lot to take away from that one, honestly. And the Thunder, I can imagine, happy to be home, even just for a little bit. All right, we're going to take a short break, but do not go anywhere. If we got Royce Young here, we got to pick his brain on the all-new episode of The Path. So stick around. We'll have more after the break.
COOP Ale Works is the proud sponsor of Thunder Basketball Universe. Brewers of the fan favorites F5 IPA and 99-calorie Ice Chest IPA. You'll find those and many more COOP beers at retailers across Oklahoma. Learn more at CoopAleWorks.com.
There is a brand new episode of The Path that is now out on OKCThunder.com and on YouTube. You got to go check it out. But before you go, we've got to get some tidbits from our good friend Royce Young here about this episode in particular. This one's fun because it has a lot of special guests in it, a lot of faces versus other Path episodes where it's like 1 or 2 guys. But this one's got a whole
team.
Crew. Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, no, this was really fun to do. Kind of the genesis of it, the core thing is about the record-setting night the Thunder had, 41 assists on 47 baskets against the Pacers, which just think about that. That's that's a crazy ratio of assist to basket there. But what it's kind of about is, if you're a Thunder fan and you've been watching this team, I'm sure you guys hear it all the time, is I love watching these guys play. Yes. I love the way they play. I love the way they move the ball.
It's me to myself.
I know, that's what I'm just saying too. But I love the way they cut, they space, all this types of stuff. And so it's kind of well, where'd that come from? What was the genesis of that? And a lot of it has to do with something that Sam Presti said at the end of last season of kind of one of the core concepts the team wants to operate with is less patterns, more rhythm. Well, what does that look like? And it's not necessarily about making an on-time pass for a layup, but it's just about the general vibe of the team to where everybody's sharing it, everybody's elevating everyone else's play. And one of the things we kind of tried to look back at was a game last season in Dallas. It's something that Sam had kind of referenced at the end of the season as well, but he talked about where he felt like that was the best stretch of basketball in the third quarter last season against Dallas that the team had played, because they were really playing in that flow where everything was just kind of going back and forth. Defense was flowing to offense. Offense was flowing into the physicality on defense. And it just kind of the episode's really just about like how those kind of building blocks were set there, and you got a glimpse of it at that time. And now this season, you've seen some of those fruits grow out a little bit more, and you've seen it happen more and more consistently. And if you talk to the coaching staff, they're going to say, no, we're not there yet at all where we want to be on this sort of thing. But this is a Thunder team that was, I think, 30th in offensive rating the last 2 seasons and have jumped well up into near the top 10 this year. And a lot of that has to do with some of that work that was done that you might not have noticed, that might have been kind of invisible in like a random third quarter in January last year in Dallas. But you lay that foundation and you end up with things where you produce a game with 41 assists on 47 made baskets.
Yeah, and this is a continuation of sort of a bigger trend that the Thunder organization has gone towards, as you're saying, Royce. Like, when you look at the play calls now compared to 10 years ago, they're more like ideas.
Yeah.
There are some concepts or some a lead for a paragraph. It's not like a fully drawn out, written out paragraph.
Script.
It's exactly like, you think about,
it's like a writing prompt.
You have like horns twist and all sorts of different things that were much more intricate and complicated, and every single player on the court had like a specific defined role and the coach was calling out the play. That's not what's happening anymore.
Yeah.
You might see a quick hand signal from the bench, and that's just an initial action that the Thunder can get into, and from there they're just playing. And so that's the type of random basketball that the Thunder is looking for, and it's what's helped OKC have one of the largest points per game increases year over year in NBA history.
Yeah, and I'd also say this, just to rewind back to the part of the conversation we had earlier about a guy like Jeremiah Robinson-Earl, is when you talk about a guy, and I think this kind of goes with that stay ready mindset, is that when you are a guy that maybe only gets a handful of shots a game, but you're also touching the ball and you're involved in the offense, that helps you in those stay ready moments, because it's not like go camp out in that corner and wait till the ball hits your hands, and when it does, be ready to shoot. That is not the way that the Thunder play. The ball's going to hit different hands. It's going to move around. The floor is going to shift from one side to the other. You're going to transport it around, and that's going to happen multiple possessions over possessions. And so when that ball does hit your hands and it's time to shoot, it's not the first time you touch the thing.
Right.
Yeah. And so I think that rhythm is like, it really just kind of leads into how the Thunder want to play, who they want to be. They don't have that, even though a guy like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a 30-point-a-game scorer, he's not a ball-dominant player that it just feels like it stops in his hands all the time. The ball still flows and moves. And, again, it's why people love watching the Thunder play. I mean, I hear from people all the time about like, man, I just love the way that this team plays. And it has a lot to do with that it's just a very rhythm-based offense.
It's very empowering for guys to feel like they're involved. They have the freedom, A, to make the decision themselves, and B, know that they're going to get involved. But the other element that really makes this work is that guys want to make plays for each other, right? Like it doesn't work as well if like you've got two guys who are like, oh, I've got the freedom, bet, okay, 4 low me. But it's more just like let's find the best shot and the best play out there on the floor. Doesn't matter what it looks like, but everybody's bought into that. Yeah,
and that's the idea, is that you want rhythm to elevate everybody's play. And I think that's exactly that point. And what's the saying go? Is the ball has energy?
Yeah.
I mean, and that's the idea, is that when the ball's popping around and hitting people, it can almost like find the open shot on its own, and that's what you want it to do.
Yeah, and how often do we see around the NBA exactly this 4-low scenario where the two guys are standing in the corner and they both know that they're never touching that basketball.
And you can see it in their body language.
Exactly.
Just standing there.
And then you expect them to get back, and you better play hard on defense and fight through that screen.
And if you don't think that that's going to affect that, and it's also going to affect when the ball hits their hand cold, the one time that they are expected to shoot it, that it is going to have any chance of going in on a consistent basis. So you're I love this concept that you laid out, Royce. And
it's a tough thing. Like it's elusive. It's hard to capture it. You're not going to see 41 assists on 47 baskets every single night. That's and there could be nights where the Thunder have 19 assists but actually move the ball just as well. That's just the way that the game of basketball goes. But you want to capture it as much as you possibly can, but it's hard to reproduce on any given night.
If you've created the advantage, and the advantage is a straight line drive, that's just as good as an assist. What you pointed out there is it's very loud when it's 41 on 47.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a fun night.
That was so great.
Go back and watch those highlights on YouTube, because that ball was moving all over the place, and it was fun to watch.
The ball has energy, and this episode of The Path has a lot of good tidbits and some fun faces that you might recognize, so I would recommend you go check it out. It's on YouTube right now, or you could go to OKCThunder.com and check it out there. All right, before we let you go, we got to let you know what's on tap for this team for the rest of the week. We're recording this on Monday, March 20th. 27th, which means the Thunder has a back-to-back coming up this week inside of
More
Paycom
games.
Center. More games. That's right. So a couple of Eastern Conference opponents, the Charlotte Hornets coming to town on Tuesday, and then the Thunder plays the Detroit Pistons on Wednesday. After that, it is a quick trip to Indianapolis to face the Pacers. That game is going to be on Friday.
And then after that, it's the last week of the season.
Which is crazy.
I mean,
Wasn't it just
is
Christmas?
Upon us. Yeah, it is upon us. The month of March disappeared. And for good reason. The Thunder played, I think, is going to play 17 games in March. So we were on TV for you every single night and bopping around all over the place. So great opportunity for this young Thunder team down the stretch here, 7 games to go. Very
good experience. Sam Presti's talked about games of consequence.
Mm-hmm.
These are games of consequence. This is something you can learn from each and every game that you play in. So we felt that in the West Coast trip.
Yep.
And you're going to experience that as the team closes out this 82-game schedule.
And guess what? They're still getting better every single game. These guys are growing from their experiences, and it's been really fun to watch. So tune into Valley Sports Oklahoma if you want to catch the game live. WWLS, the sports animal, and the Thunder Radio Network if you want to listen to it on the radio. And come back to OKCThunder.com postgame for all the coverage, everything that you need to know from that game. Until then, thanks so much for watching and tuning in. Be sure to like, rate, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much to our producer, Matt Bishop. And until next time, Thunder up, and catch you later.